What's up YouTube? Today I bring you a pretty sad video because at this point I'm all out of copium and I'm pretty much relegated to believing that loot is probably not getting changed. I'm going to go over some of the latest updates that GGG has given the community. So you can see here, this is a sign that says no changes ahead, and that's pretty much what I at this point feel that GGG is at. I don't think that loot is getting changed because in some of their posts that they had, in their wording, it sounds like they have no intention at all, and they're probably going to quadruple down on the changes that they've potentially already made. And this is pretty sad because as we can see here, right now we are back at prime time and it's at 68,000 and the peak is getting lower by the day. So let's hope that they do intend to make some changes to loot, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but they did make some great changes, and the main change they ended up making was that they nerfed most of the defensive Arch Nemesis modifiers. So their reasoning is that when certain Arch Nemesis modifiers stack, this led to some crazy long fight for certain builds. This is why you saw people running around in circles trying to kill mobs. And one of the main offenders was if you played a build with one single resistance type like fire or something else like righteous fire, for instance, if you ran into a mob that had like plus 10 fire resistance and 50% reduced effective scorch down from 80%. This would lead to some insanely long fights against essences or other rares that had a lot of Arch Nemesis modifiers. So you could get potentially Flame Weaver and Incendiary. So you have no longer has plus 50% to fire res. So these changes seem pretty good in terms of pretty much opening up build diversity, because I don't really think Arch Nemesis modifiers are that much of a problem from what I personally experienced, but that's probably because I was playing a pretty powerful and strong build. So if you're not playing a really strong build, then these Arch Nemesis modifiers could be potentially game breaking in the sense that they pretty much made your build unable to function, and this should open up more build diversity for certain builds that would normally struggle against Arch Nemesis modifiers. So that's why I think that this change is overall insanely good for the state of the game. However, now we move to some of the more ominous stuff, and this is kind of sad. Now, in GGG's post and Bex's tweet, there's some ominous wording where it sounds like they will be quadrupling down on the loot changes. Now, I truly believe if they do this, that this might be pretty much the final nail in the coffin in terms of this league. Now, I'm not going to say it's all doom and gloom, like if they nerf this and they don't revert the item drops this patch, that it's going to be gone forever, because I do think that the game is really easy to change and revert it back to the previous state where it's still very good, like 3.18. Like all it really takes is one patch. It might not happen this patch, but it is not going to be the death of PoE, because I do think that they will adjust the numbers even if they don't do it right now. So the reason why I don't think they'll do it right now is if you read the post right here, it is tomorrow we will post an explanation of what our intentions were with the balance changes in this expansion and what went wrong with our process. We're sorry for the delay on this. It has been a bit of a week. So they've been having a pretty rough week overall. Not really sure why. Maybe it's the Reddit or something like that. Or maybe they've just had a lot of changes that they needed to push out. And then if you go look at Bex's tweet, which I actually have over here, we are working on a post about Arch Nemesis mods and our thoughts about item drops. We're hoping to get these topics out later today or early tomorrow. Now, what this means from what they've been saying is that they're pretty much just going to be writing down their thoughts and explanations, and they're probably not going to do any changes at this point. And I do think that I don't really think they're going to revert to changes. They might give another buff to loot drops, but I think at this point in time, and I hope I'm wrong, I think the loot changes are going to be here to stay in 3.19. And that is a very sad reality, as juice mapping and pretty much any group play is thrown out of the window. And even if they were to change the loot, I don't really think it would save the player numbers, because I think it's too far gone at this point. We're almost 1 week into the league and they still haven't really announced any real changes for the loot. And I think at this point, people will probably just be waiting for next league for something to get fixed. So what does this mean for the future if they don't actually change anything? And something you might know is that they didn't even mention harvest or crafting at all. At this point, I don't really know if they're satisfied with what the harvest life force is going to be. and the removal of certain crafts. And I will make another video about some crafts that I think that should be re-implemented back into the game. Now, first off, with endgame juicing dead, this pretty much means the meta will pretty much shift to doing league mechanics that have a guaranteed reward chest like Legion, Expedition, Blight, and Heist, and etc. So pretty much any method where you're killing mobs in order to try to get their loot is no longer really a viable option. So no longer are you going to be doing Deli Orbed maps and killing beyond mobs to drop stuff. You're no longer going to be killing breach mobs to drop stuff. And the list goes on and on. Alba is no longer really that great because they nerfed every single past league mechanic pretty much in terms of the actual quant they have. What this also means is that magic finding, which is probably one of the most beloved ways of playing in the end game for a lot of people, is just completely dead because the quant modifier, you're modifying something that is so low, like 200% instead of 3000%. So obviously magic finding is going to be infinitely worse. What this also means is that group play is pretty much just wiped off the face of the planet. There's no more group magic find groups. There's no more really having an aura bot because having the player quant or party quant is pretty much useless at this point in time. So something that is good is that Rarity seems to be working on Solar's touch mobs. I don't know if people have seen the screenshot on Reddit, but Solar's touch, when you drop currency and you have Rarity, you could potentially drop like 10 to 20 or 30 divines. Someone actually has, I think, a picture of a group actually dropping 60 divines from a Solar's touch mob when they had Rarity and Quant. So some things could still potentially be better, but in general, the state of the game for the end game juicing will now pretty much be dead, and we'll just be doing Legion, Expedition, Blight, and Heist over and over and over again. And if you enjoy those league mechanics, then I guess the league is great for you. Now, there's also no future for endgame crafting as players now have to annul and potentially destroy an item they spend days farming for. Now, I do know a lot of people think that crafting is dead mainly for the endgame players who are the ones that make all of the mirror items, but that couldn't be further from the truth, right? The endgame players can afford to break their items. They can afford to lose like 20 or 30 divines and mess up their items because they have so much currency. Now, this is more of a thing for newer players who are just trying to get into crafting. They're trying to meta mod their item. Maybe they're trying to reforge speed where prefixes cannot be changed to try to hit T1 attack speed. And when they do that and then they fill up their suffixes, they're kind of screwed, right? In order to fix their item, they now have to annul and pretty much hit a 50-50 in order to save their item. And these people will be doing it on an item that they probably spent days farming for. And that's literally the worst part of the game in the sense that you can break an item completely and start from scratch when you have worked so long to try to farm for the item. I know this firsthand. A lot of people have quit the game in the past because they break like 3 different Maven Orbs. And this is much, much worse than Maven Orbs because you're pretty much at the final stages of crafting. Now, this is, I think, a huge, huge change that should probably be reverted if they can reforge prefix, key prefix, and suffix. They should probably also revert reforge X more likely. They should also probably add back jewel implicits and harvest. And they should probably add back divines because I do think that the removal of harvest divines for even rares is kind of extremely bad for certain builds, and I really don't like it. Now, Chris's vision for crafting, and he always talks about this, is chaos spamming and exalted orb spam. Every single time he brings up crafting, he says, don't you have a great exhilaration when you close your eyes and slam with an exalted orb? Well, let me tell you something. Chaos spamming and exalted orb is no different than going to the lotto or just rolling a slot machine over and over and over again. It is not fun. It is not interactive, and it has no depth to it. Now, before it was fine because players didn't really know what options could exist. But now that we know we have the options, it just feels extremely bad to have them taken away, and we're pretty much sent to the Stone Age. It's like if you knew that cars existed and now all the cars are gone and we're forced to ride on horses again. It's the same exact concept. Now, overall, I do think nerfing Arch Nemesis modifiers is actually a huge, huge nerf to Headhunter, but I do think that Chris is right in that Headhunter shouldn't limit their design space and balance changes so much, but if you have a Headhunter, just know nerfing the Arch Nemesis modifiers removes probably one of the biggest aspects of Headhunter, which is how defensive it makes it. And how it makes it so that you can pretty much run a character with 0 defenses and be perfectly fine. Now, I don't really know if these changes will make Headhunter not viable in terms of just making a ZHP character extremely tanky, but I do think that it will definitely have an impact that could be felt. Now, Lake of Kalandra is a whole nother issue altogether, and I do think that the lake is currently still extremely unrewarding. Now, this is Jung, and he's doing, I think, a T14 difficulty, and he has a reward chest he's excited to open. Now, let's watch what happens.
T14, Tyranny, I-83.
Yep. Nothing even shows up on the loot filter. Now, he's not even surprised anymore because at this point, he probably expects it. So this is something that's clearly wrong, and I think this is after the balance patch that they put out, which buffed Lake of Kalandra loot or something like that. And that just feels terrible. Now, I want to leave it off with this thing that Chris said. And so this shows that Chris actually knows what's going on. So that's why I have faith in the long run that loot will be fixed, because there's no way they would do this. Watch this.
Trust us, it's good, right? And they're going to say, let us disable Bloom. And we're going to say, no, trust us, it's good. And they're going to be very angry. And that's kind of what's going to happen with item drops. And trust me, I care a lot more about item drops than Bloom, right? We kill the item drops, we kill the game in days, you know?
Isn't there like 2 levels?
See, I care a lot more about item drops than Bloom, right? We kill the item drops, we kill the game in days.
See, he literally says we kill the item drops, we kill the game in days, right? Days. And I think he's true. He's literally killed off the player base in days. Like, the player base is destroyed for 3.19. The economy already feels really slow. No one's really buying any items because they actually have no currency at all. So he's pretty much killing off the game, and I do hope that I am wrong about how I don't think they're going to fix the loot this patch. But in the future, there is always 3.20. I don't think that this is the death of the game. And personally, for me, I'm still enjoying playing the game to some degree. It just kind of sucks I can't do any juice maps. But I do think the longevity for the league, for me personally, is going to be a lot lower if doing juice maps just isn't rewarding and you can't really craft endgame items outside of pretty much doing lottery stuff. But on the bright side, you could actually now fracture cluster jewels. So right now, the fracture mod has been changed from 5 to 4, which means you can actually fracture cluster jewels. So you have this cluster jewel right here, which you can fracture. So this should be a kind of a spike in endgame power. If this is not going to be reverted, if they revert this change, then, well, I guess we get nothing. But thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you find more mirrors, exalts, divines, and mage bloods than me, and see you next time. Bye.